Hello, I hope you had a good April and had a chance to do some reading, and I'd love to hear in the comments below about any good books you've read recently, or maybe bad books, because that's really interesting to hear about as well. So I'm going to discuss everything that I read over the past month, both the good and the bad and the in-between. It was mostly good books this past month, but others, some I felt quite mixed about, so I'm going to get into that. And I read quite a lot over the past few weeks. I've read 12 books in total, as well as bits of another book, and I'm going to discuss that book that I've read bits of first. But these aren't going to be full comprehensive reviews of all of these books. This is more just an impression of the books I've read and things that have really stuck with me from these particular books. I have made full reviews of some of these other books, but others I haven't discussed at all yet, and so I'm going to discuss those ones first. But I went to a really interesting and great event this past month at the Barbican here in London that was celebrating Derek Jarman's book, Modern Nature, because it was a series of readings from this book by a number of different actors and musicians. And so there were the musicians Ali Alexander and Will Yuan, but also the actress and singer Jessie Buckley was there, and I just think Jessie Buckley is so cool. And I've been at a couple of events in the past where she has been there, and I've wanted to go and say hello to her because she's been in so many great literary adaptations, and she's narrated some audiobooks, some Dickens, and yeah, I just think she is so great. But this event was really beautiful and fascinating, and a great celebration of Derek Jarman's work, because Jarman was a filmmaker, an artist, and activist who died of AIDS, and but he also lived in this cottage in a very remote part of the country in Dungeness, and he kept a garden there, and so he wrote about the experience of this landscape, and you can see from the cover it's a very stark landscape and all very small plants, but the way he writes about it in this book is so beautiful. The way he captures this environment and describes it, it's so poetic and really stunning. And so the readings from this book really brought out that, but also he was HIV positive, and so he discusses his diagnosis in this, and his process of contemplating mortality, but also issues to do with stereotypes around AIDS in Britain in the 1980s and in the larger world. And so it's a very moving book, and that's really beautifully written, and so I've been going and reading bits and pieces of this, and I did visit Dungeness a number of years ago to see the cottage for myself, and it's so interesting seeing this landscape in person. But the actual event with the readings wasn't just straightforward readings. There was also music, and there were images, and it was really artfully done and put together, and such a fantastic celebration of this great artist's work and life. I also read Eimear McBride's most recent novel, The City Changes Its Face, and this is kind of a literary sequel to her previous novel, The Lesser Bohemians, which follows two characters of Stephen and Ellie, who are a couple. They are both actors, but there's a wide age difference between them, where Stephen is about over 20 years older than Ellie, and so it follows these actors' lives, and as they explore their very complicated pasts, and it's written or mostly written in Eimear McBride's characteristic prose style, which mixes adjectives and nouns, and it's this very distinct style and way of portraying consciousness and the world around us to mostly powerful effect, although the writing is so distinct and different from a traditional narrative that it always takes me a little while to get into a book by McBride. And so I started reading this book not once, not twice, but thrice, or three times. When so I started reading it, I read 25 pages and felt like I don't really understand what is going on here, even though I've read The Lesser Bohemians, so I was familiar with these characters and this situation, and it follows them a while later after the events of the Lesser Bohemians. But yeah, I just felt a bit lost, and so I went back to the beginning. I started over again. Felt like I was getting into it a bit, then got to 50 or so pages in and felt lost again and completely disorientated. So it's like, okay, I'll go back and start at the beginning again. Now, normally for a book that I felt like I was so confused and not understanding what I was reading, I would probably set that book aside. But for Eimear McBride, I think it's really worth sticking with her writing, because it is so original, the way she captures experience and our thoughts in her prose is so original, and there's a lot of humor and surprising elements that enter into the way that she writes this. And I often find it helps when I'm trying to read her books, that if I'm alone in the house, I will start reading aloud some of it, just to hear the sound of the way she uses language, and that really helps me to comprehend it a lot more. And so the story of it, once I figured out what was going on, it was following these two characters through two different timelines, basically, and it kept switching back and forth between the two timelines of there's a period in the present where the couple are in an apartment together, and he has just arrived back late from a performance, and things are very, very tense between them, and the whole atmosphere between them is very tense. There's a lot that is unsaid between these two characters, and so in the alternating chapters, it flashes back to the past leading up to this present moment, and why things are so tense, and what they've gone through, and what they've been withholding from each other, and so it builds up to this much more complex understanding of a relationship, and the nuances of that, and these individual characters' distinct experiences, and why they have come to such a clash. And partly this is to do with the reintroduction of Stephen's biological daughter from a previous relationship, who he had been estranged from for a long period of time, but then they reconnected, and how she enters back into their life, but also what each of them are going through. And Stephen has also become a filmmaker, that he's created this film which is based off from his life. He was abused as a child by his mother. He went through a lot of substance abuse. He had a lot of mental health issues, as well as relationship problems, and the film is portraying that. And it's so fascinating how a section of this novel shows both him and his partner Ellie and his daughter going to see this film, and so it captures in the prose them watching the film, and so it describes what's happening on the screen, as well as their reactions and some comments they make while watching this film, which is such a fascinating way to portray both his past, but a certain interpretation of his past through this medium of film, and then how that is impacting people that he is very close to, and then how that leads on to their relationship changing over time. And so it's a really fascinating way of writing and way of capturing an experience. I did feel a bit like bogged down in some sections, and if you're following a couple that are just in this very tense relationship and that are not saying the things that ought to be said to each other that I got quite frustrated, and a lot of times I'm like, just say what you need to say. But of course the story shows partly why it's so difficult to say what needs to be said to each other, and that is part of the whole point of it. But it doesn't necessarily make it a pleasurable reading experience at all times. Although, as I said, the way she uses language, that it's so, and the way she constructs her sentences and frames experience in a certain way is so surprising and gives a lot of pleasure and delight as well. So I ended up feeling quite mixed about this, but I do think that McBride is such a fascinating writer and someone that really stands out in the literary landscape today, and there's really no one doing what she is doing. Natasha Brown's most recent novel, Universality, was one I was really looking forward to because I was a big fan of her first novel, Assembly, and like that first novel, this one is quite short, but also very complex. But I ended up feeling quite mixed about this, and it's been interesting since reading this and then going and looking at some other reviews of it, and a lot of readers that I follow that I really trust their opinions felt very positively about this, but I've felt a bit deflated by it. So the premise of this is quite interesting, how she constructs this story as well, and relates it, because it begins with an extended news article about a dramatic incident that occurred in rural Yorkshire, in a wealthy man's house that's been taken over by squatters who have created a kind of intentional community, and they call themselves Universalists, and they're squatting on this commune that they formed in this wealthy man's house during the pandemic, and so there's legal issues because they're having a gathering when people are supposed to stay separate from each other, and someone in this community hits over the head the leader of the community with a bar of gold, and so this article is exploring how this happened, the stories of it, the mystery of what happened to the perpetrator, and the complex issues behind it. But after relating this article, this extended article, it then gets into the individual experience of some of the participants and their own perspectives on the story. So in a way, it slightly reminded me of Hernan Diaz's novel Trust, in the way that we are reading a story and you begin to question the intentions behind what you are reading, and I think it's interesting how it does that. But issue I had with this book was that all of the characters came across to me as kind of stereotypes, or kind of these figures that are very one-dimensional, and I'm not saying that figures like this don't exist, but I just felt like I couldn't really buy into the story because these characters felt so one-sided in this way, and one of the central figures, she's a journalist who's become famous for these like sensational and controversial articles and having opinions on social media, and so I think Natasha Brown is exploring how this is something that has been occurring in recent years, and there are people with some quite like extreme opinions, which it's whether do they really believe those opinions? Are they tapping into attitudes that are out there in society, or are they stirring up people's ire and forming divisions and groups, and but also how we consume media and what we believe about the media we consume? And I think these are all really interesting questions, but the way she goes about it in this novel, it didn't entirely work for me, or was effective for me. But like I said, that I know lots of readers that have really appreciated this book. So if you disagree with me, feel free to do so in the comments below. Very recently, I also read two novels that have a surprising parallel between them, even though they're in very different contexts and countries. But I always find it a weird delight when I'm reading two books that are otherwise very different from each other that have this very strong and surprising parallel between them. And with these books, it has to do with inherited land, and part of the main plot points of these books is about what to do with this inherited land. And specifically, the inherited land in both of these books is very dilapidated and run down and virtually abandoned. So there is The Brittle Age by Donatella de Pietrantonio, and who's an author of a novel called A Girl Returned, which I absolutely loved reading, and I thought this was very good as well, but I probably didn't love it quite as much as A Girl Returned. But yeah, it's very good. And so at the center of this story is this mountainous region in Italy, and a plot of land there, which the woman at the center of the story has inherited, and there's a question about what is going to be done with this land. There used to be a campground there, but this was abandoned a long time ago during her teenage years, when there was a very dramatic incident occurred in the area where two girls traveling through the area were killed, and a third girl barely escaped with her life, and so partly it's about the mystery of and dramatic incident of this killing that occurred in the past, but it also has to do with her present and how her daughter has returned home from university in Milan, partly because of the pandemic. This again is occurring during the pandemic, and but something happened to her daughter as well, and her daughter has become very introverted and very not wanting to engage with any other activities, but and so it's following her life, and it goes sort of back and forth between the past and the present of this, and the question of what to do with this land. There's a kind of holiday corporation that has designs upon this land, and there are local shepherds that want to maintain this land for being used for grazing, and so there's protests around that, and so it's about the drama of that. But it's following her present state of mind, and her conflict and reconciling between these incidents of the past and issues that she's dealing with in the present, and it's very well written. I enjoyed reading this. I thought it was engaging all the way through, but again, I just didn't love it as much as her previous book of A Girl Returned. But I'm going to see the author talk about this soon, so I'm looking forward to that. And then with Tash Aw's book, the South, which I made a video about recently, but this also has to do with a patch of farmland which is inherited after the grandfather of a family dies, and how the family that have inherited it go to this farmland, which is suffering from a drought, and so the farmland is barely usable anymore and isn't producing many crops, but it primarily follows the central character of Jay's experience, who's the son of this family that go to this farm, and a romance he forms with another young man on the farm who's been working on the farm, and it shows them as they work together and form a connection with each other, and it's really beautifully rendered, but also following this Chinese immigrant or family, their descendants of Chinese immigrants to Malaysia on this farmland, and the question of what's going to happen to this farmland and with these the characters in this family. And this is the first book in 4 books that the author Tash Aw is planning, and so it's going to be quite an epic series. I mean, he's talked about in interviews how he wanted to write a big family epic, but then sort of felt like he didn't really have the stamina or drive to do so, and he felt like readers aren't really as invested in those kind of old-fashioned style, like 1,000-page family epics anymore. So he wanted to break it into 4 different books and concentrating more on particular moments in these families' lives, which I think is a quite interesting different approach to a family epic, to just capture a certain moment and where the family is at that particular moment. And how this captures the process of memory, I think is so unique how he does that in this book. So I'm really looking forward to reading more books from the series and some of his past books, because this is the very first book that I've read by this author. I also read Han Kan's most recent translated novel, We Do Not Part, and this book I thought was so brilliantly done and so powerful. And even though the very first chapter of this book, I felt so disorientated. This is another book that I had to start reading it again 3 times, but just the first chapter of it, because I felt so disorientated and not sure what was going on, because we were following this character as she was like in a moment of crisis in this project that she wanted to create and talk about an incident of genocide from South Korea's past, and how to capture that. But it was very disorientating in the first chapter, but then I was very relieved to see that as it goes along, it follows much more about her connection with another artist and photographer, and their friendship with each other, but how her friend has this incident, because as well as being a photographer, she's also a woodworker, and has this incident in her woodworking practice where one of her fingers gets cut off while she is working, and so she has to go to the hospital and to try to get her finger reattached. And while she is there, and while the central character goes to visit her friend there, her friend says that, I'm really worried about a bird that I have at my house who's been left on its own, and it will die if somebody doesn't go back there to feed it and give it water. So the central character agrees to do that, and which is feels like quite like a simple story at first, but her journey getting there, it's such an arduous process, because it's in the depths of winter. There's a lot of snow, and there's the snow imagery in this novel grows to have such really powerful and meaningful effect of looking at existence and memories, and how it explores that through this journey, but also when she arrives at this house, and how the story grows increasingly surreal and almost hallucinatory, and in such a fascinating and moving way. I thought was so powerful as a way of exploring this complex history of genocide in the local area, and how to deal with that information. How do we deal with these horrific things that have occurred in the past, and not allow them to defeat us, but also how to honor people that suffered and died as a result of these incidents from the past. So she's been planning on this art project for a while that she's wanted to collaborate on with her friend, but she's not really sure about how to actualize this in an actual video or art piece, and so how it explores the process of that. But as she is like sifting through these memories of the past and documents from the past to honor this history and people that were lost in this incredibly horrific incident, and the complex politics, larger politics of the country and the wider world that led to this horrific incident. I thought this was incredibly powerful and effective, and well worth winning the Nobel Prize for Literature. From the Women's Prize for Nonfiction shortlist, I also read the book Private Revolutions by Yuan, who's a really fascinating figure because she is the first Chinese-born Briton to be elected to UK Parliament, and she's been in the news recently because she and another MP were refused entry to Israel. And so this book is exploring recent Chinese history, but rather than an overview of the politics or society of the time, it is looking at the cases of four women who were born in the 1980s and 1990s in China, and following them in their process of development within a country that has been rapidly changing over the past few decades. And the author notes how she changed their names and some of the details about their lives for these individuals' own safety, because there's so much surveillance in the country and about what people are allowed to say about their experiences in China. And it gave such a fascinating understanding of what it is actually like living in China, and specifically the challenges that women face in modern China in trying to find work and have families and relationships, and it takes four different women who are from different economic groups and who come from different parts of the country. Some are from more rural regions and some are from more urban regions, and about the particular challenges that they all face, and how each of them are quite bold in their own way of forging their own path within the restrictions of the society around them, both the social expectations that are placed upon them. Some of them are just, expected to marry and have children, and that is sort of all that they are meant to do, but in finding work and in becoming political activists, is so fascinating following their stories. And also I really appreciated little details about how there are certain things about the country, like the left in China is considered more conservative, and which is kind of the opposite from the West. And so I think that naturally leads to some cultural misunderstandings. But I also really enjoyed how she gives so many details about these characters' lives that I felt like I really understood their background and their present circumstances, and what they have been going through and are still going through as young women in the country. So I thought this was really powerful, really well done, and gave such great insight into a country that I felt like I can't get from the news or any other kind of source. And she so talks about this book and how she in the afterword of it, that she felt very privileged to be able to speak to these individuals and get their stories at this time, because there are increasing restrictions about people being allowed into the country and to be able to talk about what its citizens are going through. Now, I absolutely loved Megan Hunter's novel Days of Light, and I was quite surprised after falling for the style of this book and the unique way it portrays its central character of Ivy's life, that I'm going to read some reviews of this afterward, and from a number of different readers, and finding that there were quite a lot of mixed feelings about this book. But personally, I just completely fell for it. Now, in a separate video I made about this, I felt like I was slightly gushing and could have been a bit more articulate about talking about it, but specifically how this story relates to the Bloomsbury Group, which I think is so fascinating how it does so, because the kind of structure of the story is loosely inspired by the group, and the Ivy central character of Ivy is kind of modeled after the historical figure of Angelica Garnett, who was the daughter of the artist Vanessa Bell, and Vanessa Bell, of course, was the sister of Virginia Woolf, the great writer, one of my favorite writers of all time, and so I've always been really fascinated by the Bloomsbury Group, but they had such a messy situation, and Angelica wrote a memoir about this, of how so she ended up marrying in her early 20s a man that was more than I think 20 or 25 years her senior, but that was the least shocking thing about this. But this man who was a close member of the family and the Bloomsbury Group, he had known her since her birth, and had actually joked at Angelica's birth forth that he would marry her one day, and wouldn't that be so shocking? But then he actually did that over 20 years later. But more than that, this man she married, Angelica married, was also previously a lover of her biological father. So yes, very complicated, everything that was going on in the Bloomsbury group, and the mixture of relationships, that it was a kind of bohemian atmosphere where there was a lot of artistic experimentation, but also experimentation in sort of social structures and relationships, and which is quite exciting and interesting, but also had a fallout for some of the children, like Angelica. And so yes, the character central to this story, Ivy, she is kind of modeled after Angelica, and some aspects of her story are parallel to the historical figure, but she's also quite different in a lot of the ways, and the structure of the Bloomsbury group, and the particular characters and how their story plays out is quite different from the reality. So Megan Hunter really made this story her own, but in a way that I thought was so fascinating and compelling. And so we follow Ivy from a day in Easter Sunday in 1938, and a dramatic thing that occurs then, and someone who disappears, but also a strange incident where she sees this mysterious flash of light, and it follows her over a period of days, basically like leaping forward through the decades, and following her at different days in her life as a way of portraying her experience and evolving sense of self, and how this explores her own artistic sense, because there's a lot of expectation on her being the daughter of artists and writers, and so that she would kind of go into the arts, but she doesn't feel really comfortable in any particular medium in that way, but more how she relates to nature and a spiritual side of life. And I'm not someone that is religious or is particularly drawn to reading about spirituality, but the way it explores her own evolving sense of spirituality, I think, is so beautifully rendered and really mysterious, and not just in terms of Christianity, but also she goes to see a medium at one point, and so is exploring a kind of other side of life in this way, and shows her evolving sense of self, and also a strong relationship she forms with another woman, and so how it explores this queer relationship over a long period of time and throughout a series of decades, and social change, I think is really interesting as well, but primarily just the writing in this book I think is so beautiful and gorgeous, that I just completely fell for this book. With my online book club, we read the Women's Prize long-listed novel The Dream Hotel by Laila Lalami, which sadly wasn't shortlisted. I think it really should have been shortlisted. And this is a tricky one to talk about, or even to consider whether you should actually read it, because I know some members of my group chose not to read it or continue reading it because it was so anxiety inducing, because it felt so close to reality, because it follows a woman who is stopped at an airport, and then told that her risk score is so high that she needs to be monitored for a period of time in a facility, which is a jail, but they don't call it a jail. They're not allowed to call it a jail, but it is basically a jail. And but this isn't a short term of monitoring. It goes on for months and months and months, and how she has been sort of profiled in this way, and part of the reason for her high risk score is because she signed up to this program to help her sleep better, which involved having a chip inserted into her brain, and that information from this chip and her dreams were being monitored, and this led to her risk score going higher. And so even though she hasn't committed any crimes, she's been held in this facility because it's seen that she has the potential to commit crimes. And though that is, of course, part interpretation of her dreams and her experience, but also profiling her as someone from the Middle East and who's descended from parents immigrants, and how this also feeds into that experience in her being profiled in this way, and it follows her experience as her situation grows increasingly, circumstances grow increasingly degraded, living in this facility. And there's so much in this about how we are monitored and profiles due to our online activity, and that feels so close to our present reality, and how just with some switches in laws or interpretations of laws, that this could lead to ordinary citizens being incarcerated in this way, and how people that are kept in this facility for monitoring their labor is being used for profit, and so how there are capitalist motivations behind this as well. So I think even though this is a kind of dystopian story set in the near future, it speaks so much to our present anxiety and circumstances that I can really understand how this would feel like almost too triggering for some readers to read. But I found it completely fascinating and absorbing, and a really great book that speaks to so many issues that we really need to be thinking about a lot more. Another coincidental reading pairing I had with two books that I picked up separately, but have this parallel of looking at mother and son stories, especially mothers sort of later in their lives, and their adult sons, and the complications of these relationships. And so in The Language of Remembering by Patrick Holloway, which is a debut Irish novel, it follows a man who's been living in Brazil and married a Brazilian woman and had a child, and he returns to his native Ireland because his mother is suffering from Alzheimer's, and he wants to help care for her, but it's incredibly emotionally difficult dealing with a parent who's going through this, but also his period of readjustment to living in Ireland again, and wanting to purchase a home and establish a place for his family there, and how difficult it is given the expense of the properties and finding new work. So he's going through a lot, and he makes some not so wise choices and goes ways of handling it, but part of his way of wanting to reconnect with his mother is because she has reverted to speaking the Irish language that her father spoke in her youth, and he doesn't speak Irish at all, so he tries to learn some of the native Irish language to be able to understand what his mother is saying in this state, and so it's really touching how he reforms a connection with her, how he is going through all these emotional difficulties, and how it portrays her experience, because there's a dual narrative of showing her youth and teenage years when she was pregnant and wanting to marry her local sweetheart, and how these two parallel narratives eventually merge, I think is so beautifully done. Now, in Adam Haslett's novel Mothers and Sons, the way this portrays a adult son and his mother who have been estranged from each other for a long period of time, and how there is a past in history there, and a really traumatic incident which they haven't really dealt with, and shows their gradual reconnection with each other. I thought is really beautifully done, and how it balances between their two stories, and how each of them are really going through their own issues, but this is part of the reason why there is this disconnect between them, and the real difficult process of trying to form a connection with each other again. I thought that was so well done, but especially with his character as an asylum lawyer, showing his day-to-day life and legal experience and taking on clients and the real process that he has to go through to try to defend his clients. I thought that was so fascinating. But yeah, there is so much emotion in this book that is just kind of like simmering beneath the surface in the way that Haslett portrays this, I think is so powerful. Another book that I fell head over heels in love with, even though some other readers have been quite critical of it, or have been really mixed about it, is Stag Dance by Torrey Peters, which is a collection of, it's called novellas, but really it's like 3 short stories and a longer story, novella of which is the titular story of Stag Dance, and the way that this captures really different kinds of trans experience in many different contexts, both in the past and the present and the future, I think is so interesting and gives such insight into different individual trans experience, but it is also so creative, and there is so much energy and fun in this book. I had so much fun reading it that I was compelled all the way through, and was really impressed by the creativity shown in the different stories, and so I just loved reading this so much. And probably my favorite story was the story set in the boarding school called The Chaser, but yeah, I think it's the collection of as a whole is just such a pleasure to read, and I'm going to see Torrey Peters in conversation in a week or so really looking forward to that. And then finally, I just finished reading the novel On the Calculation of Volume, book 1, because this is book 1 in a planned 7 books series, and the first 2 books have been published. I think the next 2 books are going to be published later this year, and then some of the final books haven't been written yet. I think she's only written 5 books in this series so far. So I'm going to be discussing this with my online book club this weekend, and there's so much to say about this story because it's kind of a time loop story where a woman gets caught in November 18th. She is stuck in this day, and every morning she wakes up and it's still November 18th, and she has all of her memories from the past, but for everyone else it's as if this day hadn't happened before. And so it's a kind of Groundhog Day situation, but not totally, because there are physical things about her that change over time. Her hair still gets longer and stuff, and she's able to affect the physical environment around her, but in ways which aren't always consistent. But how this portrays her relationship and but also her mortality, and it's just there are so many interesting things that come out of this story, both in the immediacy of the plot of being caught in this time loop, and so this sort of science fiction aspect of the story, but also how this has to do with life and in general, and thinking about relationships and our own mortality from a really interesting angle. And so yeah, there's a lot more to say about this book, but I only just finished reading it, so I'm really looking forward to hearing what my book club thought about it and having more discussions with them about it. But those are all of the books that I've read in the past month. So if you've read any of these books, I would love to know what you think about them in the comments below, or if you're interested in reading them now, please let me know about that. But also let me know about anything else that you've read recently that you want to tell me about. I would love to hear about that. But I hope you're doing well and reading good things, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.